Hello Lady is a recently released visual novel that immediately hooked me with its unique premise. Now, after being Rewrite Plus's #1 playtester, I approached this new release with a silver cross in one hand and a golden ankh in the other. I was pleasantly surprised to find only 3 mistakes in the entire visual novel, and none of these mistakes hindered the experience. Of course, that is how visual novels should be released, but I digress. Now let's talk about how fucking good this visual novel is.
それは違うと思うよ。もう殺すわよ。
じゃあバトルスタート。
かっこいい。もしかしてスキャンダル冗談なのか。そうだけど。
Be me, hungover at 3 a.m., casually browsing Twitter. Neko Nyan intrudes upon my feed, and reluctantly, I proceed to the Steam page for Hello Lady. Modern fantasy, you say. Dark, gritty plotlines, you incorrectly assert. Change the future, you boldly proclaim. Will lay me down and stare at me outside my window with eyes devoid of human emotion at 3 a.m. on church day. You had me at your store. Hello Lady gives you no time to regret your decision buying it, because as soon as you press play, fuck the title screen, you are thrown straight into the thick of it, with our lovely ladies skewering a poor sat for some reason, which we will learn later. Once the momentum slows down, protagonist Narita Shinri steps up to the plate, immediately asserting his unique character traits and a voice so smooth you'll begin to mistake your sexuality.
この夜にふさわしい良い夢を見る。
Stumbling upon a terrorist attack on his way to school like any normal high schooler, he proceeds to knock out the 6th terrorists using his honed physical prowess, much unlike any normal high schooler. Having successfully saved Otonashi Saku, who is one of the famed crowns, which we'll get into in a minute, Narita puts on full display his noble side and his not so noble side.
サクのその麗しき美巨乳が
Though Narita's initial meeting is a quite unfortunate foreshadow for the girls yet to be introduced, all is well, and besides having to leave his much trusty maid Hishiamori outside the gates of the fabled Special Academy, he moves in with and meets the rest of the cast. It's at about this point that the pacing slows down, and you finally get to your classic school life common route, which doesn't last long, mind you, but it's a nice break to learn the subtleties of the characters, who are a little more than they seem. Akihito Tamao is your typical delinquent type, though mostly reformed, and the second to have the pleasure of experiencing Narita's character. Katsuragi Sorako is a naive but gentle girl who is, you guessed it, the childhood friend character, third to be taken in by Narita's charm. Takazaki Eru is the ever-Saku loyal, cute young girl who is a bit of a troublemaker and the best character in the game. I'm not biased. Also being the 4th victim taken in by Narita's lust. And finally, headstrong and ever-noble Saku, who leads a group known as the Crowns. Technically, Kabutoyama Mitori is included in the main cast of characters, who is a high-class girl who holds herself to high standards, but that conversation is a bit spoilery, so we'll avoid that for now. Luckily though, in being a side character, she narrowly escapes the best breast beast path of destruction. That was difficult to say. The academy was started by Mikado Kurofune as a way to hone the abilities of students with various powers to prepare them for all the issues that the world will face in the coming generation. There is a hierarchy of power users, with our main cast including Narita being at the top. I find stories with hierarchies like this to be quite interesting, and it does cause some friction down the road. Much like with the Chaos games, these powers come at a time in a student's life when they face immense hardship, leading them to develop powers. The academy's goal is to find students with these abilities who typically find themselves outcasts due to being above humans, and then hone their unique ability to prepare them for the future. The Crowns are basically the student council of the school, and all of the highest level ability users joined it, but as it is not a rule, Narita declines not only being a part of the Crowns, but also the Academy's entire idealism in a nutshell. For you see, Narita isn't there to find a school life befitting to his powers and live happily, but rather he exists as a remnant for revenge after a specific tragedy befell upon him, put into place by various actors within the Academy's walls. The common route is incredible, and lays the groundwork for the nuances behind each character as well as their goals and ambitions. Narita is always true to himself in humorous ways, but that also holds true for his revenge plot. Minor spoilers are about to be told, so either skip this section or go make some food. I recommend pizza. Now, for the most part, each route branches off after Narita finishes his first act of revenge. From there, the routes focus on different aspects of his revenge in ways that intertwine with the character of focus for the route. Narita's power is also quite vague early on and is only expanded on after the first two routes. Though, if you pay attention, you can learn hints about his power from the qualification it is given and the lectures given about the different types of powers in the common route. I found the overall mix between the silly slice of life with Chad Narita, the dark underside of the academy along with Narita's unfortunate past, and the occasional action scenes was handled almost perfectly, as the slow drip of information and well done pacing keeps you consistently hooked. I couldn't leave my computer for the 2 days after I bought this visual novel, for better or for worse. This visual novel is a mix between romance, shonen-y action, and mystery. The first two routes you have to do, Tamao's and Sorako's, give you a lot of information to help you solve the overall mystery, but don't give you too much information either. And after Eru's route, you know some shenanigans are happening and should prepare yourself for the penultimate route, of which belongs to Saku, of course. Afterwards, you have to do the fan disc routes for Mitori and Hishiya before you can move on to the true route. To be honest, having to do those fan routes before the true route kind of kills the momentum you receive from Saku's route, but it's not too big of a deal as the true route just immediately throws you into the action and goes out with possibly the biggest bang there could have been. Tamao's route in particular surprised me because I thought I wouldn't like it. I wasn't particularly interested in her character, so I was delighted when I found out that her character was a lot more than initially meets the eye. I felt similarly for Sorako, whose route actually reminded me of a specific fruit of Grisaya route in some ways. I won't say who though, as it would be a bit spoilery. Whilst these routes are probably some of the weaker ones, I can appreciate what they do to set up the next couple of routes. And then there was Eru. The lolly thing aside, I was quite interested in her character. Also consider I love the voice actress, and you end up in a situation where, even if I told you I wasn't biased, we'd both know that it would be a lie.
てめえ、問題児1号の自覚を持ってほしいです。自分、見に来てよかったです。
But I loved her route. It really paints her character in a different way that you came to know in the common route, and even throws in a pretty big twist that is a huge cliffhanger prior to Saku's route. That being said, and this is probably obvious, but whilst the mystery elements in each of the routes are interesting and keep dangling the truth in front of your lustful eyes, if you find you don't like a character in the common route, then their character's route may not be to your liking. I found some people really didn't like Eru's route due to this, and whilst you can sum that up to Reddit being Reddit, you can also say the same for me for the initial impressions I had of Tamao and Sorako. Though trust me, it's worth it to pull through. Saku's route is the last route of the Elite Four, and oh boy, holy crap. Another huge twist arises, and Saku is absolutely badass and shows clearly why she's the best. Well, for the most part, but that's part of the twist. It also prepares you for the true route that starts where Saku's route leaves off, but before that, the characters you forgot about. Hishiya still remains relevant after the common route, so you probably haven't forgotten about her, but Mitori disappears entirely, and every time you come back to go into another character's route, you'll be like, oh yeah, Mitori's route is much different from the others, and really is the most unlikely scenario, as it kind of derives Narita from his goals for the sake of Mitori. It's worth it though if you like the character. I mean, you need to read all of these to get to the true route anyway, so you don't get a choice. Hishiya's route is basically Saku's route, but shows what Hishiya does behind the scenes, as well it expands on Narita's and Hishiya's past. And then the true route will put you for a ride, and expands on another unmentioned character. To be honest, I didn't really buy this character's final redemption, as after Saku's route it is clear that they were pretty self-serving. Furthermore, Saku is absolutely furious at this character one moment, and whilst they end up being extremely important in the end, I didn't understand why she was suddenly crying over their death. I won't say any more on that front, and the end really is awesome as long as you don't mind it being a little bit overly shonen. And that was basically my thoughts on the story, though I do want to mention one character, Taigi Mikado. His constant conversational battles with Narita tend to be very interesting, and he takes different actions in various routes that tend to vary from making things better to making things horrendously worse, specifically in Saku's route, but in the end he is a fun male side character. Not even are we at the end of January, and I've already found a visual novel that will surely be in consideration for one of my 2022 favorites. Not to mention Narita being one of my favorite protagonists ever. I should have played something worse, as now my rewrite plus frustration is beginning to fade, and I'm foolishly feeling excited for some new releases again. But don't worry, I got something worse lined up for next week, so look forward to that. This visual novel is about 40 hours long. It probably took me closer to 30 hours, but I tend to only listen to the whole voice lines of characters I like, so I will finish faster than those who let them play out. All of the voices were enjoyable to me, however, especially Eru and Narita's. If I could, I would inject their voices into my veins before bed, but unfortunately, the world isn't perfect. Typically, I say the soundtrack is pretty good, but I'm gonna be a little bit more critical from now on, since I should probably have gone more loose if we are taking my namesake into account. The soundtrack doesn't hinder the experience, and some tracks are good, but not too many are specifically memorable. And the one that is particularly memorable, I can't find it on YouTube, so that's kind of annoying. CGs are aplenty, the visuals are pretty spick and span, and the occasional animations help bring the action scenes to the next level. Furthermore, the visual novel has one of those sprite editors, which are always fun to play around in for 20 minutes after you finish the true end to a visual novel, for which then you afterwards delete. Worth mention are the choices. Last week I mentioned that the choices were extremely obvious, which whilst gave less variety to the experience made it easier to get into a route. Well, here we have the opposite. There are a lot of choices. I enjoy that they sometimes used it for a comical effect, such as giving you 3 choices that are basically the same, like when it came to Narita's unwarranted casual breast grabs, but it also makes it convoluted to get on a specific character route. That being said, they give endings with hints to help you out, basically conveying that there's a pretty set-in-stone route order, and also conveys which choices are important in the event screen, which is pretty nice. Even nicer are some choices that have a character chibi head on them, so you know which one to pick on the non-obvious choices. So all in all, they probably handled choices in the best possible way. I still had to use a guide, but if you're one who prefers to not use one, it shouldn't be much of a problem. What may be a problem is the previously mentioned route order, which unfortunately doesn't have a lot of room for preference. You must do Tamao or Sorako as the first 2 routes, followed by Eru 3rd and Saku 4th. Overall, this ends up working well, as the routes are built with this setup in mind, but you may be frustrated if you want a route that is locked behind many others and thus may have you playing up to 20 hours before you can even start it. If you're mainly playing the game for romance, know that it is more of a sideline thing behind Narita's main goal. One last thing about the story is that it has this secondary short epilogue that I'm pretty sure was only created so Narita could say,
Hello, Redi.
and have everyone be like, they said it! You should play this game for its fantasy elements and Shinri Narita. The cast of girls definitely enhance the experience, but the romance is alright at best. So with all of that being said, you already know my opinion by this point. Especially since the visual novel is only about $30, it would make a fine addition to your wishlist or backlog. I gave the visual novel a 9 overall on Visual Novel Database, which I typically base and reevaluate my scores as I read more visual novels. Or so I say, but I've only done it twice. I'll try to be more consistent with that though, I promise. If you want to watch me actually read something I dislike, stick around for next week when I talk about Star Melody, Yume Mi Dreamer. It's not a pure visual novel, so some may argue that it's not worthy of mention. But if you want to be a stick in my ass, I'll be a stick in yours and say you probably should have commented that 11 months ago on my ReZero visual novel review that you probably didn't even know existed, because my subscriber amount has more than doubled since then, and you shouldn't watch it anyway because all of my old videos suck, including this one when I rewatch it a week after I put it out. Do the things or don't do the things, but either way, I'll see the beautiful folks that stick around soon enough.